The Sports Network is a Canadian English-language sports specialty service, established by the Labatt Brewing Company in 1984 as part of the first group of Canadian specialty cable channels. The idea coming from a 12-year-old Sean Skoreyko. Since 2001, TSN has been majority-owned by communications conglomerate Bell Canada, with a minority stake held by ESPN Inc.via, 20% share in the Bell Media subsidiary CTV Specialty Television. TSN is the largest specialty channel in Canada in terms of gross revenue, with a total of $400.4 million in revenue in 2013. TSN's networks focus on sports-related programming, including live unrecorded event telecasts, sports talk shows, and other original programming. TSN was the first, and most recent national cable broadcaster of the National Hockey League in Canada. Its stint has been interrupted twice by rival network Sportsnet, most recently as of the 2014-15 season under an exclusive 12-year rights deal. TSN holds regional television rights to 3 of the NHL's 7 Canadian franchises. As of 2015, major programming rights held by TSN include exclusive coverage of the Canadian Football League and Curling Canada's national championships, coverage of the NBA and the Toronto Raptors, coverage of Major League Soccer, and exclusive rights to Vancouver Whitecaps FC, along with Canadian rights to the tournaments of FIFA and the IIHF, the NFL, Formula One, NASCAR, the Premier League, the UEFA Champions League, Ultimate Fighting Championship, and the Grand Slam tennis tournaments, among others. TSN also receives a large amount of programming through its minority partner, ESPN. The TSN license currently comprises 5 24-hour programming services. From its launch until 2006, TSN operated as a single national service. In 2006, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission ruled that TSN could operate multiple feeds with a limited amount of alternative national programming. This was followed by the launch of TSN2, a second 24-hour network under the TSN license that was legally considered a West Coast feed of TSN. As of 2010, TSN has been subject to deregulated Category C licensing by the CRTC, which allows multiple feeds to be operated under the TSN license with no restrictions on alternate programming. TSN used this new ability to operate an autonomous TSN2, along with part-time feeds for regional NHL coverage. On August 25, 2014, the primary TSN service was restructured into 4 24-hour feeds: TSN1, TSN3, TSN4, and TSN5, with each designated as the primary TSN network for each region of Canada. TSN now essentially operates as a group of regional sports networks similarly to Sportsnet. Alongside the national TSN2, the 4 channels air some common programming and simulcast major events, but are capable of airing programming autonomously, including alternative national events and studio shows, supplemental coverage of larger events, and regional programming. History. Early history licensed by the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission on April 2, 1984 as Action Canada Sports Network. The channel was launched by the Labatt Brewing Company on September 1 of the same year as the Sports Network, or TSN. The network was founded under the leadership of Gordon Craig, a former employee of CBC Sports, alongside coverage of the co-owned Toronto Blue Jays. TSN also reached a deal with ESPN shortly before launch to provide additional programs, although reaching around 400 100,000 subscribers. TSN's early years were hindered by its initial status as a premium service, bundled in a high-cost package with movie channels such as First Choice and Super Channel, alongside competition with free-to-air sports broadcasts by CBC Television among others. To improve the prominence of the network, TSN sought to obtain the national cable rights to the National Hockey League, rights that, according to the league, were not sold under the current arrangement with CBC. However, the task was complicated by claims by CBC that it owned the cable rights to the NHL, along with the involvement of competing beer company Molson in Canadian NHL rights at the time. With the help of a Molson employee who was a friend of Gordon, a deal was reached between TSN, Molson, and the NHL to allow the network to broadcast games on cable. By December 1987, TSN had reached 1 million subscribers, but the network's staff sought wider distribution for the channel as part of basic cable service. The CRTC approved the network's request for permission to allow TSN to be carried as part of a basic cable lineup. Mike Day, producer of TSN's daily sports news program Sports Desk, lamented about the shift to basic cable and the larger audience it would bring, commenting that one night you're doing a news show that potentially has an audience of 1 million people, and the next day the potential is 5 million people. In 1991, TSN acquired rights to the IIHF World U20 Championship, otherwise known as the World Juniors, which were previously broadcast by CBC. TSN's coverage, along with the recent Punjab in Destiny incident and a strong performance by Canada at the tournament in the mid-1990s, helped to significantly heighten the profile of the tournament in the country, to the point that it is, alongside U.S. college football bowl games, regarded as a traditional sporting event of the holiday season in Canada. Due to CRTC regulations on the foreign ownership of broadcasters, Labatt was forced to sell TSN and RDs upon its acquisition by Interbrew in 1995. Labatt's broadcasting assets were sold to a privately held consortium named Netstar Communications, the investors of which included a number of Canadian firms as well as ESPN Inc., which held an interest of about 30%. The sports network launched its website TSN California on October 1, 1995. In 1997, the CRTC began permitting TSN to offer an alternate feed, which could be used to provide a regional opt-out of the main TSN service for programming that must be blacked out in the rest of the country. Alternate programming could make up a maximum of 10% of the TSN schedule, an average of 2.4 hours a day. Acquisition by CTV, expansion. In 2000, after ESPN blocked 2 attempts by the Canadian partners to sell Netstar to CanWest, CTV Inc. acquired the Canadian partners' shares. CTV Inc. was acquired by Bell Canada and the Woodbridge Company as part of the joint venture Bell Globe Media in 2001. As a result of its purchase of TSN, CTV would be forced to sell its regional sports network CTV Sportsnet, eventually selling it to minority shareholder Rogers Media. Following the acquisition, TSN would move its operations to CTV's Agincourt complex. However, Sportsnet would not move from Agincourt until 2008, which led to the now competing networks sharing the same building as the headquarters. This oddity would become an inside joke between personalities on both networks, who commonly referred to jumping between the two networks as crossing the parking lot. Following the sale, TSN began to closer align its on-air imaging with that of ESPN. The most prominent effect of these changes came with the rebranding of TSN's flagship sports news program Sports Desk as Sports Center, a Canadian version of ESPN's Sports Center. TSN also launched a number of digital specialty channels in 2001, including a local version of ESPN Classic, the NHL Network, a network devoted to ice hockey and the National Hockey League, and WTSN, a channel dedicated to women's sports. On August 15, 2003, TSN became one of the first two specialty television services in Canada to be available in high definition. TSN's first live HD broadcast was of a Canadian Football League game between the Montreal Alouettes and Hamilton Tiger Cats. It was to occur on the same day, but was delayed to August 16 due to a major blackout which occurred the day prior. Beginning in 2006, the CRTC officially allowed TSN to operate national secondary digital feeds with limited amounts of alternative programming. Following this development, TSN began to use such a feed to broadcast additional programming that could not be aired on TSN due to scheduling conflicts or other events. On August 29, 2008, the feed evolved into a new 24-hour channel, similar to ESPN2, known as TSN2. Upon its launch, TSN2 was legally considered a West Coast timeshift feed of TSN, although soon after TSN2 was launched, the CRTC announced a proposal to remove genre exclusivity protections for mainstream sports and national news channels in the near future. As a byproduct of the decision, TSN would be allowed to use streamlined conditions of license, which state that the service may offer multiple feeds, without any restrictions on alternate programming. TSN was officially permitted to use these streamlined conditions of license on February 1, 2010. Acquisition by Bell. TSN Radio. On September 10, 2010, Bell Canada announced plans to reacquire 100% of CTV Globe Media's broadcasting arm, including its majority control of TSN. Under the deal, Woodbridge Company Limited, Torstar, and the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan would together receive $1.3 billion in either cash or equity in BCE, while BCE would also assume $1.7 billion in debt. Woodbridge has since simultaneously regained majority control of the Globe and Mail, with Bell retaining a 15% interest in December 2010. The deal closed on April 1, 2011, after the CRTC approved the sale on March 7, 2011. The new company became known as Bell Media, after a long-standing speculation about TSN's interest in launching its own TSN-branded radio network. TSN entered radio broadcasting with the launch of the first TSN radio station, a relaunch of AM station Chum in Toronto on April 13, 2011. Bell Media's Bell Media radio division already operated several sports radio stations elsewhere in Canada. It was reported that Bell could theoretically relaunch these other stations under the TSN radio brand in the future. Also in 2011, TSN acquired broadcast rights to the returning Winnipeg Jets. TSN would establish another part-time feed, TSN Jets, to broadcast the game. Additionally, co-owned CFRW would also gain radio rights to the new Jets. CFRW, along with Montreal station CKGM, also migrated to the TSN radio brand on October 5, 2011. Additionally, Bell would also launch TSN Mobile TV, streaming versions of TSN and TSN2 offered through Bell Mobility's mobile TV services. On December 9, 2011, the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan announced that it would sell its majority stake in Maple Leaf Sports and AMP Entertainment to two major telecommunications companies, Bell Canada and Rogers Communications, with a 37.5% share each, in a deal expected to be valued at around $1.32 billion in total. The deal was completed in summer 2012, following the approval of Canada's Competition Bureau, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, as well as the leagues for each of MLSE's main sports franchises. The deal was expected to have a major impact on future broadcast rights for MLSE's teams, including the Toronto Maple Leafs and Toronto Raptors, as their ownership of the teams will offer enhanced coverage for the team through new platforms such as mobile television. In March 2014, TSN launched its TV Everywhere service, TSN Go, allowing subscribers to TSN on participating service providers to stream TSN networks online or through a mobile app. On launch, TSN Go was available exclusively to Bell TV and Rogers Cable subscribers. It has since been expanded to other providers, such as Shaw. Loss of national NHL rights, expansion into regional service. Following the announcement of Bell and Rogers' acquisition of MLSE, concerns were again raised by critics, speculating that Bell Media could attempt to acquire full rights to the NHL after CBC's current contract with the league expires in the 2013-14 season, using their ownership of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the NHL's highest valued franchise, as an impetus for such a coup. Concerns were also raised that such an arrangement could prevent wireless service providers other than Bell and Rogers from accessing its content. The CRTC had ruled in favor of TELUS in a decision requiring Bell and other media companies to allow other competing wireless providers access to its content, and not exclusively tie it to their own service. However, in November 2013, Rogers Communications announced that it had reached a 12-year deal to become the sole national television rights shareholder of the NHL, beginning in the 2014-15 season. Critics considered Rogers' move to be a major blow against Bell and TSN, showing concerns for how the network could sustain itself without what is considered a key property in Canadian sports broadcasting. However, they also acknowledged the network's continuing rights to IIHF hockey tournaments, the Canadian Football League, and TSN's growing regional NHL rights portfolio, including the Maple Leafs, which would, beginning in the same season, air 26 games on TSN per season. In a series of Twitter posts by TSN personality Bob McKenzie, he explained that even with the loss of national NHL rights, TSN's goal was to remain the source for all things hockey through its analysis programs and regional coverage, and that this was not the first time that TSN had lost its cable rights to the NHL. On May 6, 2014, TSN announced that it would launch 3 new channels, TSN3, TSN4, and TSN5, in September 2014 to coincide with the network's 30th anniversary. TSN President Stuart Johnston described the expansion as an important evolution for the network, as it would allow TSN to make more efficient use of its portfolio of sports properties. The network promoted that these new channels would allow TSN to broadcast a larger amount of ESPN content and live events, particularly including expanded coverage of major events with multiple games occurring simultaneously. Although the expansion was discussed by TSN staff as early as 2012, Critics considered the loss of NHL rights to Rogers to be a catalyst for the move, as TSN attempts to defend its position as the largest specialty television service in Canada in terms of total revenue. The launch date of these new channels were pushed up to August 25, 2014 in order to allow multi-court coverage of the 2014 US Open tennis tournament, which began the same day. TSN also announced that it would use these new channels to house regional NHL games beginning in the 2014-15 season, featuring the Jets, Maple Leafs, and Ottawa Senators. On January 13, 2016, TSN announced that it would present its first telecast in 4K ultra-high definition, a Toronto Raptors basketball game, on January 20, 2016. It will be followed by a slate of regional NHL games and other Raptors games in the format channels, as is permitted for all categories C sports services. The TSN license is permitted to have multiple channels, and currently encompasses all of the channels listed in the table below. However, unlike premium services like the Movie Network, subscribers receiving one TSN channel are not necessarily automatically entitled to receive all additional channels, and in many cases they are only available by paying a separate charge to a service provider. For example, until 2013, Rogers cable customers were required to subscribe to the HD Specialty Pack add-on in order to receive TSN HD. On many providers including Rogers, TSN 1, 3, 4 and 5 are included in a single package, but TSN 2 is still provided only as part of a separate higher-tier package. On May 6, 2014, TSN announced plans to launch 3 additional multiplex channels, for a total of 5 24-hour national channels. The existing TSN service was replaced by 4 regionally focused channels, TSN 1, 3, 4, and 5, similar to the Sportsnet regional channels. All 5 channels are available nationally, but on most local providers. The channel location previously occupied by TSN's primary service was filled by the appropriate regional feed, while major sports telecasts are simulcast across TSN 1, 3, 4, and 5 to ensure national coverage. Alternative studio shows and live events can also be split across the channels. The feeds carry a small amount of programming tailored towards the respective regions, including simulcasts of lunch-hour shows from TSN radio stations in the relevant region, and regional NHL coverage, when TV listings and promotions make a reference to a program airing on the TSN network, or simply TSN, without disambiguation. It can normally be assumed that the program will be simulcast on TSN 1, 3, 4 and 5. The launch date was originally announced as September 1, 2014, to coincide with the 30th anniversary of TSN's launch, but was moved up to August 25 in order to accommodate multiple court coverage throughout the 2014 US Open. Prior to the launch of the additional feeds, Bell executives stated that the expanded 5-channel service would be offered for the same rate as was charged at the time for TSN and TSN2 together. Notwithstanding this claim, some providers, including Shaw Cable, have elected to charge extra for some of the new feeds. Most major Canadian television providers carried the new channels upon the launch, including Bell, Cogeco, Eastlink, MTS, SaskTel, Shaw, Source Cable, Rogers, and TELUS. Videotron, a cable provider which primarily serves the province of Quebec, was a notable holdout for the new feeds. On October 13, a Monday night football game was left unavailable in English to Videotron subscribers because TSN 5, the only feed it carried, was airing a regional Ottawa Senators Florida Panthers NHL game. On October 16, 2015, Videotron president Manon Brouillette responded to complaints by subscribers surrounding the incident, and confirmed that it had reached a deal in September to carry the new feeds. The addition of TSN1 to the lineup was accelerated to October 20, 2014 to ensure the availability of the week's Monday Night Football game, with the remainder added on October 29, 2014. The current TSN feeds, and any programming unique to each feed as per TSN's current TV schedules, is shown below. The other sports channels owned are managed by Bell Media and ESPN Inc., including ESPN Classic, NHL Network, and the French-language REQ des Sports and related channels, operate under separate licenses.